Day 662 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 347,000 military personnel losses, which adds in another 1,090 in the past 24-hour reporting period. Then as for hardware losses, really quite a big day. So starting off, 44 tanks, a truly remarkable figure. And just for some added context here, late yesterday evening, 4 of these tanks losses alone occurred in the single location of Kherson's Krinky region, all lost within a period of about 5 to 10 minutes. Then moving on, a whopping and surprisingly non-record breaking 60 APVs, and then a fairly consistent 38 artillery pieces, many of which are not so much the tracked-wheeled SPGs anymore, but instead they skew towards the towed artillery pieces like the Soviet D-30s and even the D-20s. So old with limited range, thus pushing them up to the front lines, making them much more vulnerable and exposed in the process. Then headed back across to the map today into Ukraine, as overnight Russia attacked Ukraine once again using a small amount of the Shahed drones, 5 in total, with all 5 of them shot down by air defenses of the AFU, which therefore means that Ukraine has intercepted 109 out of 117 Shahed drones launched by Russia in just the past 7 days. And not to put too fine a point on it, but this is more or less how air defenses should work, because meanwhile, when we head down south to the Russian-occupied Zaporizhia airspace, as the Russian military was involved in a friendly fire incident whereby one of its air defense systems once again accidentally shot down one of its own planes. This time it was a Russian Su-25 jet, and an event that has since been confirmed by numerous Russian Telegram channels. Now, just for a refresher on this Russian Su-25 aircraft, and others just like it, it was being used for offensive operations in the Zaporizhia region, primarily used for attacking Ukrainian military positions on the ground, using a combination of guided and unguided air-to-surface missiles, and the very occasional autocannon fire for strafing rounds. So, as we call it, air support for their ground forces attempting offensive operations. But it is unsustainable for Russia to keep losing its planes like this, or in any way, especially to its own forces, which it is still doing to this day. And it's a situation that will only be made worse by the fact that after Ukraine's finished training and starts deployment of the F-16 fighter jets, which are highly capable multi-role fighter aircraft that would be able to target and engage Russian Su-25 aircraft, among other Russian aircraft, in beyond visual range engagements, using, for instance, the advanced 180-kilometer medium-ranged AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, which will once again forever change the dynamic of the war, just turning into yet another issue that Russian aircraft will have to contend with. And just like many other weapons deliveries we've seen into Ukraine, we may get little to no notice once these aircraft are first deployed into the country. Then we'll head across to the northeast, as Russia appears committed to intensifying its efforts to seize Kupiansk in the Kharkiv Oblast by deploying additional reserves. However, in this direction, the Russian forces continue to unsuccessfully attempt to break through the defenses of Ukrainian forces, and have to continue to deal with the threat or hassle of Ukrainian drone-dropped munitions. Also, we do still tend to spot many elements of the Russian forces not switching into their winter camo military uniforms, which would certainly be more ideal in environments like these. Though it's likely due to a case of lack of resources on the Russian part. Then, meanwhile, according to military intelligence reports, there has been a successful incursion into Russia's Belgorod Oblast, resulting in the destruction of a platoon stronghold of Russian forces. And do note, actual incursions like these are performed by, shall we say, anti-Putin Russian groups, if you will, such as the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Free Russia Legion group. But then focusing back on the Ukrainian territory, as Russia has been quite active in two locations. Firstly, just south of Bakhmut, near to the canal, which is west of Kurdy-Mivka, and this is where the canal runs, as you can see. As Russian forces have reportedly retaken some ground here, although no map changes for this capture that we can see yet. And then moving south, as perhaps the most Russian activity to be found in the last day has been Avdiivka, or really Vodiana, where Russian forces made small incremental gains on 4 separate axes of attack at this location, amounting to a total of about 1 to 1.5 square kilometers of gains. And so, taken in the context of the larger Russian objective in this region, being to encircle Avdiivka by capturing the land to its west that connects to the northern and southern flanks connecting with one another. And then, speaking of the northern flank, a Ukrainian mechanized brigade that goes by the name of the Korn Group repelled yet another attack on Stepova, with Russian soldiers trying to approach the settlement by foot, but failing to grab a foothold. And this Russian methodology is surprisingly common in the north at the moment, as Russian infantry groups of varying sizes are effectively dropped off near the front, and appear to be commanded to perform infantry assaults, with very limited or no additional resources such as vehicles. And then moving on, because zooming out, as somewhere in the east, we saw a Russian BMP infantry fighting vehicle that was taken out by a Javelin ATGM fire missile. Now in this instance, there was 6 Russian soldiers on top, and given the overcrowding, it's somewhat safe to assume that the inside capacity of up to 11 passengers for this vehicle was at least partially being utilized. Then also in a similar event, as it occurred on a Russian BTR personnel carrier as well, this time carrying 10 Russian soldiers, although in this event, Ukrainian fire came from an FPV drone instead, for which this is a still image from the FPV drone's point of view, just mere seconds before impact. Then we'll head across to some news for today, as it's a slightly shorter video for sure, but so starting off, here we go. Putin made a recent address stating that he vows to make Russia a sovereign and self-sufficient power. And although he didn't explicitly refer to or even use the word sanctions in his address, which is something that he has denied time and time again as something that affects Russia, but this is really what his speech was about, promising to remove Russia's reliance on the West. And really, for Russia's sake, I would hope that he doesn't mean self-sufficient power to the level of his allies like that of Iran or North Korea. But either way, these are all just meaningless talking points. For instance, Putin has for many years promised that Russia will be one of the 5 largest economies in the world, but he always has to, well, he seems to have to push back out that date as time goes by. Then moving on to a similar news piece related to sanctions on Russia, Putin continued to unveil highly aspirational goals, stating that by 2030, Russia aims to manufacture over 1,000 civilian aircraft, including models such as the MS-21 and the IL-96, among others. Now, as of 2023, Russia's production of passenger planes has been limited to just two aircraft. One SSJ-100 was produced in February, followed by another in June. And yet what he's stating here is more than 1,000 to be produced in only 6 years. So the bigger question might be, can Russia's industry keep up with Russia's propaganda? But even that's only half the picture, as Russia has had 15 instances of emergency plane malfunctions reported in just December alone. So far, with nearly half a month to go. And it's worth mentioning here that nobody likes Russian passenger aircraft, not even Russians. They're not exactly a hot export for the world market either, much like Russia's automotive industry, in fact. And many Russians have quite the tendency to avoid using either, as Russian cars and planes always seem to be riddled with safety concerns. But as for this story, even with no clear pathway to higher production capacity or resolving safety concerns, Putin puts on a hopeful and good speech, promising a great future, but many, many years away from now, thus removing all accountability in the process. What a champion. Then as for some more news, so right next door, the countries of Greece and Turkey, who have had a long history of disputes and tensions which primarily revolve around territorial rights, airspace, and maritime boundaries, have just signed a declaration of friendship and good neighborliness just the other day in Athens. Now, as we've seen before, sometimes these types of agreements aren't worth the paper they're written on. But these two nations have clearly seen what the outcome is of land disputes when they tilt their heads just to the northeast, as they note that military engagements to attempt modern-day land grabs has a very likely tendency to backfire and destroy the aggressor's own local economy in the process. And so this friendship agreement has a few clauses that include, for instance, the agreement to have more cooperation promoting peaceful coexistence, then joint action in specific policy areas, and then refraining from statements undermining each other, not a bad one, and then lastly the agreement to resolve disputes amicably. So you see, let's not call Russia a complete failure of a state, because they can be used as an example of what not to do instead. Then moving across to a super quick Russian military mobilization blunder segment today, guys. So in Moscow, Ukrainian partisans snuck into a military hospital only to find poor conditions, insufficient treatment for the wounded, and most shockingly, not being recognized as unfit for military service, largely due to the hospital being overcrowded, thus leading to wounded soldiers getting recycled back into the frontline meat grinder system. So the Kremlin is obviously completely without compassion for its own. Then moving off across to a couple of quick rapid fire funnies to round it all off today, guys. So first one here. So Russian media themselves published a video of a Russian truck that transported a damaged Su-34 for repairs, which had the unfortunate incident of driving itself into a ditch. So it almost feels like a metaphor for their entire invasion. Then as for a final funny, quick one there as well. So there was a recently spotted abandoned Russian tank in Marinka in the Donbass. And as you can see here, just one great big dried mud pancake cope cage, or for an attempt at stealth characteristics. Either way, it screams military superpower to me. So that's going to be it for today, guys. A bit of a shorter video. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment, all of those nice things. Subscribe if you can as well. Really appreciate that for sure. Thanks again for all of your support. Not sure if I'm in tomorrow, but should be the next if not. And yeah, really appreciate all your time, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.